All right, so we are here at the Co-work of Londonderry today, and I'm Michelle McCartney with Mothers Illuminated. The Co-work of Londonderry is a great location if you need to get away from your kids to get some work done. They have conference rooms, office space, rooms you can rent, podcast, all different kinds of great stuff here. And you can find out more at londonderry.cowork.com, and co-work is spelled C-O-W-E-R-C. I am joined today with Carla Gericke with the Free State Project, and you're also the author of The Ecstatic Pessimist. And a lot of people might know you because you recently ran for Senate, which is super exciting. So maybe we can learn all about that. But first, how did you get to where you are now? Kind of some background.
I came on the road. I'm actually originally from South Africa.
Okay.
So I was born and raised there. My parents were diplomats. My dad was a diplomat. So I moved to America in 1996 when I won a green card in the lottery. And so I landed in Silicon Valley. I was a young attorney. My husband is a techie, so he was a tech nerd. And we just thought, we were still young. We were in our 20s. I was literally in law school when I won the green card. And we just thought, wow, this would be such a great adventure. We'd heard all the amazing things about America, and so we wanted to come and see for ourselves. So we ended up in Silicon Valley. Yeah. He worked in the tech sector. I worked for, Fortune 500 companies. I worked for Apple Computer and for Logitech, and then we went through the dot-com bubble and bust. And that made me really, really curious about economics. And I had this moment where I was like, what just happened? We went through this really big economic boom, expansion, and then the collapse. Yeah. So from there, I did research on the internet, as all good stories start and end, and found the Free State Project. And so that was back in the early 2000s, and it was really just a notion at the time, and I thought it sounded cool, and we went backpacking for several years through Southeast Asia, came back to the States, landed in New York City, started coming up to New Hampshire, fell in love with the state, knew this was like the long-term place we wanted to come. So moved to New Hampshire in 2008 and have not looked back since. It's been a busy dozen years. No lies.
Wow. So I know, like, the Free State Project, they have a lot of different reasons as to why they pick New Hampshire. So maybe we can kind of go over that. Like, what is it about New Hampshire that made you, obviously you fell in love with the state, but obviously I'm assuming there's a lot of other reasons that went along with that decision as well.
Sure. So for folks who maybe don't know, the Free State Project is a movement to try and attract libertarians and liberty lovers to the state of New Hampshire. So the idea is that, people who whose moral compass, I guess, is liberty forward. We don't really have a place, you see politics is dominated by Democrats and Republicans, and they seem to be just becoming crazier and crazier on both sides of the spectrum. And there's not really room for people who just have this sort of live and let live ethos, the sort of, I would say, like old school American values of just, do your own thing, leave people to do what they want to do. You do your stuff. You keep what you own. Private property matters, those kinds of good things. And so, So back in 2003, the state of New Hampshire was chosen. It was chosen from a list of 10 states. And mostly people were looking at places that had small enough populations where it would make sense if you concentrated a certain amount of people that, you could actually affect change. Because we are people who want solutions. Like so many people just sit around and complain. Or complain online or get in these bitter, horrible, cat fights and all of it.
Yeah.
And, but I'm very solution focused. And so I was like, what can I actually do in my own lifetime? And one of the old slogans of the Free State Project is liberty in our lifetime, and, in each of us's lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, New Hampshire. And then the reasons, of course, is it is live free or die.
Yeah.
Doesn't get more in your face in terms of what we kind of like out here.
Yeah.
But it's a small state. The population is a manageable size. It's a geographically good size, but it has everything. Like, if I always think about New Hampshire as if it was a tiny little country.
Right.
It has beaches, it has a seacoast, it has a border, it has mountains, it has, the lowland, it's got a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's a cute little country-sized country, It's 4 times the size and population of Iceland, it's bigger than Luxembourg. There are countries that are this size or smaller.
Yeah.
And so low taxes, no sales tax, no personal income states tax, and I think federal income, I think any form of income tax is a invasion of your property rights. I don't think, I always say people, I know they threw the tea in the bay for, no taxation without representation, but I'm like, no representation without vexation.
Yeah.
And we are just getting taxed to death. So it's a low tax state, so that's super cool. But then, people who are interested to find out more, there's a movie that was made several years ago now called The 101 Reasons, and it's really the reasons liberty lives in New Hampshire. So it's for families. It's things like good homeschooling, unschooling laws. We have a strong school choice movement here. Yeah. People who really are looking at innovative solutions to some of these challenges. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this at some stage, but with COVID, it's I think it shook things up. It shook up education, school choice. Like, I really do think it's a wedge opportunity, and it's a time. So, generally New Hampshire is it's got mostly positives. It's a state that still lives within its means, or did until we printed $6 trillion in a year.
Yeah.
So, so really it's a fantastic place to live. It consistently ranks either first or second on the freedom scale, on the quality of living scale. It's a beautiful place, and it's just a great, awesome little place to come live. So we picked it for the Free State Project, and since then, thousands of people have been moving. It's been almost 20 years, so it is slow going. It is a big ask. To ask people to up their lives and just, move somewhere new. But people are coming, and a lot of locals like you are just, also invigorated. I think, this past year has sort of accelerated authoritarian medical tyranny, but it has also provided opportunities for people who are solution-based and who are saying, well, okay, this isn't great. What can we do?
Yeah, and I'll definitely say, especially looking at this past year, I think there were a lot of people who sat there and said, well, that kind of thing will never happen. That kind of thing will never happen. Even I was saying that, and I'm pretty far out there sometimes, but even I was saying that. I was like, this whole, vaccine card and, the vaccine passport is there's no way America will get there. And then now here we are, literally a year later, and people are, not even batting their eyes that this is happening. And no, it's not being mandated per se, but the moment private businesses are starting to think that that's a good idea and society is backing that is when that's going to happen. you know?
And I mean, I'm a lawyer by training, but I blame the lawyers. So there's no cost to being overly conservative, right? If you're a company lawyer, you can say, well, the most cover your butt approach is do this, right? Force everyone to wear masks or whatever, because then we don't expose ourselves to liability. And that's a problem. But I also think under this COVID situation, we saw how colluding big corps, big tech, big pharma, all these people are with big government. And they really definitionally, the definition of fascism is the marrying of the private and the public sector, right?
Yeah.
Where basically the government is, shaking us down, me and you, and then, handing their money to their crony friends. And so the private company, they can do what they want and they can mandate. I'm starting to look at them as you're an agent of the state, because the customer used to be right, and I've gotten yelled at a lot over the past 12 months. Sadly.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And actually, so long story short, I was thinking of going down to New York to visit my dad. And my husband was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I don't need you getting arrested. New York is like a totally different place.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to get arrested there. No.
It's like, because there's no way you're going to wear a mask. And then, you're going to get arrested. And then I'm going to have to drive down and bail you out.
Yeah. No, you have a wise husband. And also, frankly, we drove down to South Carolina to see my parents. And we stopped in New York, New Jersey, and we couldn't even find an open restroom at a gas station.
Wow.
It was like watching America turn into a third world country. I come from a third world country.
Yeah.
I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, and when we talk about the malaise of socialism or what the dangers are of socialism, people have to remember, it sounds grand to be like, no one's going to be poor, it's going to be awesome, it's no toilets work, you can't go anywhere, you're going to get arrested, and you turn friends and neighbors on each other, and we've seen that this past year. And I read this thing yesterday, and it kind of blew my mind. So it was an experiment that they did. The book's called Thinking Fast and Slow, and it sort of talks about the two different parts of our brain and how our intuition and sort of the slower part work together. And so this experiment, it was called the Florida effect. So they take college students and they give them a whole bunch of words that are kind of old sounding, so it's, old and grumpy and slow and can't think fast and whatever. And they have to, it's a word association game. And they think that's the experiment. But the actual experiment is then measuring how fast they move to their next classroom. And in another classroom, they're primed with fast words or just normal words, and then they measure. And the group that reads the Florida effect slowing oldie words walk slower. Now, that is priming in one experiment that changed their behavior. So now imagine what has happened over the past 12 months with 24/7 propaganda, big government propaganda telling you one narrative. And how do we know it's propaganda? Two things. One is, if there's a pandemic, you don't have to try and persuade people of anything, right?
Yeah.
And also, they're silencing any voices that are alternative voices. And it's like, but why?
Yeah.
Why? I used to be able to say what I wanted and no one cared. Why suddenly are we all not allowed to say what we think?
Yeah. No, exactly. And like you said, that's how you know it's propaganda, when you're not allowed to question it. Because, and I think that that's one of the big things with, libertarianism, is just this liberty-loving, you do what you do, I'll do what I do, and as long as nobody's tramping on anybody's parade, we should be pretty good. So I think that that's, super important, is to recognize that, as a society, we've gotten to the point where, liberty and freedom is, it's wrong on every account. And I saw a great shirt, it said, legalize freedom. And I was like, how have we gotten there? Because that's where we've gotten now.
Yeah, and sadly or ironically, I had that T-shirt 10 years ago.
Oh,
so
did you?
Point is, I've been doing this a while, right?
Yeah.
I moved because I saw this happening, and I moved 13 years ago, right? So certainly for some of us, for me, it really was, the entry point was economics, right? Like I went from how could we have this bubble economy that we saw during the dot-com bubble? It's probably before your time, but like it was this bubble in the same way that we saw the housing bubble in 2008 that crashed, and the bubble we're seeing now that's about to crash. And I don't know that we can keep doing it, right? But yeah, I realized it was a shell game. And so I, again, was like, what are the solutions? And I think the Free State Project does genuinely offer a solution. And New Hampshire's a great place to raise a family. So I would highly encourage, I know your audience is, family oriented and all of that, is people should check it out because it's, I think it's a really good place to raise kids. Everyone should know about Lyme disease. Yeah. The ticks are deadly up here. It's a thing.
Yes, and I'll point out I have a great video about Lyme disease. So if you're curious about it, you can go check it out. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree. New Hampshire's great, but those ticks, it's a hot topic up here every single year.
And I think they're getting worse. Someone said this season's supposed to be pretty bad. Up north more. I haven't seen any on my dog yet.
I haven't seen any yet either.
But yeah, no one told me about Lyme disease before I moved, so I always try and mention it because I like full disclosure, informed consent in life is what we like, tell the truth and make sure people know the good and the bad.
Yeah. Well,
that's how I ran my campaign.
Yes, so you ran for Senate, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. And I know you said you didn't run on the Libertarian ticket this time, so I guess you ran Republican. Yep. So what made you run Republican, and what was your experience doing that?
Sure. So I've actually run 3 times now for New Hampshire State Senate. And I ran in 2016 because my opponent, who is still there, who's like... he's not 100, but, come on. He's like 83, right? Yeah. And he's had 12 terms now. Wow. So in 2016, the Republican Party couldn't find someone to run against him. And so I got a phone call literally at like 4 o'clock on the Friday when they closed the filing. And they called me, and they're like, would you put your name down? You don't have to run a race, just put your name down. But that's not Carla's personality, So I was like, I don't know, I need to talk to my husband. I'm actually hiking in the woods with my dog. Let me, give me a second. And they're like, you don't really have a second. Like, you have to decide. And you have to get in your car and you have to drive to Concord because you can't do the filing downtown in Manchester because it's in this last window. And I'm like, what? And so it's kind of, it's a crazy rush, and I'm in my car, and then it's bike week. So the traffic's insane. I literally got to Concord. I double parked my car. I had 4 minutes on my clock and ran up the steps, and and it's gardeners there, and I'm like sweating, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and they're kind of like, who is this? It was in my hiking clothes, Anyway, so I signed up that time. I learned a lot in that first race, and honestly, one of the biggest things I learned, which is something I like to talk about, is I'm used to succeeding in life. Like, I like to set my mind to things and like bang them out and get them done. And so it was a giant shock for me to fail, publicly, because I'm not really used to the public eye, or I wasn't that used to it then. So I got 40%.
That's
the first race, right? So I was like, okay, that's a pretty good base, but I think that's just literally people who vote down ticket, maybe 2% on top of that. So in 2018, a very unique thing happened where the LP, so the Libertarian Party, has to go and get ballot access every time to run. And that's a lot. Like, you have to collect, I think it's 7,000 signatures. It's going door to door. And that's just to get access to get on the ballot, right? Because we have a 2-party duopoly. Yeah. I think that's the word. Where the 2 parties basically collude. They pretend like they're against each other, which they are. kind of, but they're
Yeah.
also very cronyist.
Yeah.
And then they want to keep the other parties out. So the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, whatever. I would much rather see lots of parties and then sort of see this more coalition-based stuff happen. But anyway, so with the LP, they got ballot access. And so people were like, well, you're really a libertarian Republican because, I am. I'm more in the flavor of Ron Paul or Rand Paul or Tom Massey, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so they said, we'll launch a write-in campaign for you, and then we'll do a write-in on the ballot, and then you can run. In New Hampshire, we have this unique thing called a fusion candidate. And then you can run as this fusion candidate, so you're both a Republican candidate and the Libertarian candidate. And I was like, yes, this is cool, because, it feels more authentic. It feels more right. Although, to be honest, I did go read the Republican platform, and, I had to really be like, can I stand by this? And the Republican Party in New Hampshire has a very libertarian platform. It talks about free markets, free people. It's pretty solid in terms of what my values are. My values are reflected in it.
Yeah.
And so we did this write-in campaign.
Yeah.
And I knew I'd gotten enough. You had to get 30 across your district. And I knew even just in my ward I had it. But then when they read the ticker tape, I didn't have it. And I was like, this is interesting. I'm pretty sure someone's lying. So I filed for a recount.
Yeah.
And we ended up going up to Concord to do the recount at the archive. And lo and behold, I'm right. They're wrong. I did get enough write-ins. And so I became a fusion candidate. I got more votes. I got 2-3% more. And then in 2020, the LP did not have ballot access again because of COVID and because Chris Sununu, King Chris Flanunu, as I like to call him when I'm feeling irked, which this one does, he actually very cheekily said, someone said, would you be willing to waive the petition requirement because we're not supposed to go door to door now because of COVID? And he was like, well, that won't benefit me at all, so no.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so so I ran straight up Republican ticket. I got 45%. So I've gone up, and I openly talk about the things I talk about and do the things I do. So I actually feel like those people are choosing me. That's, they're actively choosing me. So thank you. And so, again, learning experience, you learn harder how to fail better publicly.
Yeah.
But it's a growing experience. I think intellectually and society sort of has moved away, with the safetyism that we see. Everything must be safe. I think we're taking away people's appetite for risk. And risk is important because risk gives you reward, but it also makes you grow. And part of taking risk is failing.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that, And so I really had to change my mindset to be like, this is not a blow so unimaginable that you can never recover. It's like bad things happen and you learn from it. And where do we go from here? And so I just keep going. I'm not sure where we're going to end up, but the race is on.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I know you just actually released your book within this past year, I think, right? So it's the Ecstatic Pessimist. So what's kind of the book about? We'll talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So it's called The Ecstatic Pessimist, Stories of Hope Mostly.
Yes.
I actually struggled with the title because I feel like if I were to, do that story now, it would be, the ecstatic optimist probably. I think it comes from a different time in my life. I was still drinking and, sort of stuff I had to work through. But it's an interesting collection of work. It's filled with award-winning short stories. In addition to my law degree, I actually did my master's in fine arts in New York City before we moved here. And so it's a lot of my MFA program writing. And so I won a bunch of awards. Most of the stories were published in, literary journals and in anthologies and books and stuff. So they're all well edited and well crafted, fancy, good literature, as one would say. Yeah. And then, and some of them talk about my upbringing in South Africa and sort of my life. And then the other ones are essays. So it's a mix of fiction and creative nonfiction. And so there are 13 essays about the Free State Project. And they really handle a lot of the personal activism that I've been involved in. So one of the things that's interesting about the Free State Project, the organization itself is a 501c3, and so it's an educational nonprofit. But because we're also a movement, right? We put the move in movement. Yeah. We're like bringing people here. The participants, do things like people run for office, they start businesses, they write books, they do all of that. So these essays are about sort of my personal activism. So it covers things like going to Dui checkpoints because, like it or not, they are illegal, unconstitutional roadblocks that should not be happening in New Hampshire. That is judging people for pre-crimes. I am all for if someone's drunk and they cause an accident, you have a bunch of causes of action. You don't have to have police action where we're stopping people on the street because here's what happens, and one of the essays covers this, is they go and then they're arresting people for pot, and they're arresting people for other things, expired licenses and whatever. So it really is a checkpoint that forces you into this illegal, unconstitutional stop. So we used to go out often, and quaintly in New Hampshire, they have to post where they're going to have the date and the time and the city where they have a DUI checkpoint. So we used to actually put together crews, be like between 20 and 50 people would show up, and we'd have road, signs saying turn here, roadblock ahead, and whatever. And people are always genuinely grateful. One of the essays is about the Bearcat and sort of police militarization and that kind of stuff, and sort of fighting the militarization of the police in New Hampshire. This is a small, safe, incredibly safe state. And there's really no reason for us to have this really militarized approach to how our policing is happening here. So it addresses that. One of my favorites was the world's first pro-tour protest. That's a hard sentence to say. Pro-tour protest. Okay. And so for your listeners, a Tor node is a node that you use, that you run through a VPN. So it's an entirely anonymous way to use the internet. It is something that's used predominantly in repressive regimes. So there's a need for it in America, I would say now. And, but in places like Turkey, lots of journalists use it. So it actually has a really important dissident or anti-authoritarian function. But also the Department of Homeland Security doesn't like it. And so they tried to shut down a library in Lebanon, New Hampshire, because they were running a Tor node because the IT guy at the library was super into open source and just, soft libertarian, I guess. I'm speculating. I don't know him. But so he was running this Tor node. And so the Department of Homeland Security said, no, we're going to close it down. And lo and behold, it was beautiful to see. It united libertarians and really angry old gray hair librarians. So it was like the libertarians and the librarians and then some open source techie kind of people. And we all everyone converged on the library, and within a day after a hearing where, it was literally, there were 70, 80 people who both testified and sent in letters in favor of keeping the Tor open, and there were only 2 people who testified to take it down, and it was literally the chief of police or the second-in-command police guy and some other statist, right? Like there was no citizens who wanted it. It was just big government who wanted big government tools. And so we shut that one down. So the book is it's available on Amazon. It's available on my website, carlagericke.com. But I mean, it's a good read. I have to say, it's hard these days to find people who will take the time to read your stuff. But every one of my friends who has, and all 14 people who've given me reviews. So if you read it and you like it, please leave me a review on Amazon. But, I'll often get two lines from real friends who are like, oh, wow, I just finished your book and it's really, really good.
Yeah.
So I hope people will check it out and read it. And the last essay, which I'm very proud of, is called How to Change the Color of Your Aura. And that's kind of tongue-in-cheek. I have no idea if auras are real. I'm not really hippy-dippy.
Yeah.
But when I maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to actively fix my health. I was overweight. I was drinking way too much. I was really, really stressed and anxious and just not in a healthy space, right? And I wanted to get back to me. And so I made a lot of lifestyle changes. I quit drinking. I changed my diet away. I don't eat processed foods. I only eat whole foods that I cook from scratch. I primarily eat keto and paleo, which means low carb and high good fats. I eat an obscene amount of bacon, and I love it.
Yeah.
And so the last essay talks about sort of that journey and just figuring out the process, which for me actually involved journaling, to be able to really write down my thoughts in a way where I could look at them and be like, am I just being kind of crazy? Because a lot of time, Michelle, we're just being kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
So much of what's going on is just in your own head. It's not, really happening. And so just really becoming mindful of that. I readopted my yoga. And so that one really has, a special space in my heart, and that's the last essay, and so everyone has to read at least that one if you do read the book.
Yeah, well, and I think that also really speaks to the libertarian inside of you as well, because that's exactly what it is. It's you have these risks in life and you're responsible for your own person. So if you want to be this, overweight person who's stressed out and drinks a lot, that's fine, but you might feel a little bit better and, you're going to have a higher quality of life.
Yes.
And it's up to that person to make those choices and to do what they need to do to make themselves feel better. And I think that that's huge.
And I think that is so crucial. And that was a penny. I mean, I always understood that even my personal lifestyle choices shouldn't financially impact anyone beyond me.
Yeah.
But I was also like, well, I'm not getting any younger.
Right.
And I just didn't feel like myself anymore. And I think maybe the way for us to try and sell this notion of liberty and libertarianism and, which really boils down to self-responsibility and the non-aggression principle, I think is a component of it as well, right? So that just means it's an ethical stance. That means don't harm me and I won't harm you. So you can use defensive force. It's not pacifism, but it is just saying that no one has the right to initiate force against someone else just because. And so that's really our beef with the state is we've built this model and we've created this system where the state has a monopoly on violence and they go around and they are hurting people. They're dragging kids in handcuffs around in schools. That is not a system I can support. That's not how decent people solve their problems. We don't solve it with violence. We solve it with speaking and ideas and trading ideas and talking about them. But we have one side that is... So we have one side, I think, that's thinking and one side that's very feeling. And we in the world, I think, have lost the balance. And really it's restoring that balance of both of those things. And so I was super logical and I had to get back in touch with my feeling side was part of my journey of healing, I think.
Yeah.
And, and so now I'm very mindful of trying to be like, okay, let's create holistic situations. So with libertarianism, for me, that is what makes the most sense, because I don't actually have the answers for you or for your life. But I think if we are to have any kind of social contract, and for people back home who can't see me, those are giant air quotes, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't the social contract be you take care of yourself so that you're not a burden on others, right? That is kind of how it used to work. And now we've shifted this thing to where it's just like we're punishing the responsible people. And I'm like, I don't like that model either.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think society, like you were saying, the logical and the feeling, and I think society is going so much towards the feeling that there's no logic anymore.
Well, there can't be, right?
Yeah.
Because, and that's the danger, because if everything is feelings, it's all subjective. Mm-hmm. And you can't actually legislate feelings, and they're trying to, and that's where we are, and that's why we have a problem. Mm-hmm. And that's why the last year was such a problem, because we were actually trying to create a society for the person with the lowest fear, like the highest fear and the lowest risk profile, right? And it's like, look, I'm a high risk person in the sense that, like, risk doesn't, I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I don't live in a fear paradigm, which basically just means I don't watch the news, right? Because they're indoctrinating us.
Yeah.
And they're really, it is mind control at this stage. Mm-hmm. Not like tinfoil hat stuff, but just genuinely the music, the way they use their voices. Like there's the anxious music, you know, like I don't watch that stuff, but sometimes when I'm traveling, like you see something on CNN and you're like, I didn't even know they had people with commercials wearing masks. Like I saw that later and I was like horrified. I was like, oh no, it's gotten really bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's that whole thing back to the corporatism, right?
Yeah.
And so it's because America is so nimble and so efficient and so dynamic, you know, they're like, oh, we're going to do this. But then it's this bombardment of that priming with, you know, the Florida effect, except they did it with masks and with fear and like with priming your amygdala to only hear the fear message, and then you are quite controllable. And when you are fearful, you are obedient, and then you are compliant. And then the next thing you see, we are living in this weird world with the vax passports. I mean, I saw a meme that said, wow, it went from a conspiracy theory to real, like really fast. I was like,
Yeah. There was another good meme that I saw, and it said, you know, can I borrow some of your conspiracy theories? Because all of mine came true, you know?
I love that.
It's like, that's where we are now. Like,
and, you know, and even the notion of the term conspiracy theory is kind of a conspiracy theory, right?
Well,
It's psyops. It's a way to discredit everything.
It's created by the CIA, right?
Yeah. And it's just, you know, and it's just kind of like, well, how about we just call it theories, right? These are things we don't know. Yeah. And really the antithesis, I think that's the word, or the opposite, or the best thing we can use, the antidote to statism, to this big government thing, is curiosity. Yeah. So if you instill, that's really what critical thinking is.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't so much that you know, in fact, it's like that you know you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole and see, you know, and a lot of times it's just weird. Or like, I remember when I was like 7, I heard about the Bermuda Triangle. And so since then, you know, with 43 years on, I'm still like, oh, the Bermuda Triangle, I wonder what's up there, you know?
Has anybody gotten lost there recently?
Right, you know? But honestly, with the conspiracy theories, you know, people were saying we were crazy with all this stuff, and now it feels like it's happening. And it's a genius genius play that they did, because by doing this medical attorney thing, they turned us against each other. They made it so personal, right? Because now it's germs. And the most insidious, evil part of it was when they said, but it's your responsibility to take care of your health, right? So if we put it in the language of the progressive left, you would say, my body, my choice. And I do believe that, even though I'm pro-life, right? Because I just think that part of our problem is when we try and force laws on other people who also have a reasonable disagreement. So I'm like, I don't know, I think you're wrong, I'm going to judge you, I'm going to call you some names, but, you know, okay, I don't think it should be illegal, right? But I wouldn't do it. And so we have this notion of, you know, my body, my choice. Okay, that's great. That's self-ownership. But then they've started to say my body, my choice, and they're saying your body, my choice. So they're saying they claim self-ownership for themselves, but they're also claiming ownership over your corpus. And so with the debates I've been having with people, I've really tried to hone in on this idea of, you know, we have to admit that we own ourselves. And when people struggle with that, and then I'm like, well, how much of me do you think you own? Because clearly you at least think you own my pie hole, because, you know, and so it's a way to have those hard discussions. But what they did with this COVID play, and honestly, they've been trying to do it, I mean, from the 70s. I found a really interesting, you know, video from CBS News from the 70s where they were talking about the first swine flu, and they did a unauthorized emergency vaccine that gave a bunch of people the neurotoxin Guillain-Barré. I can't always say the word.
I know what you're talking about. Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Yes, you know, and I mean, it's literally black and white TV, you know, and I was like, wow, this play's been around for a long time, you know. So, I mean, I do think they seem desperate, so maybe we're winning, but it is hard when they keep taking our platforms away.
And I was going to say, so, I mean, here in New Hampshire, it's almost unfortunate that New Hampshire has had such a tyrant, you know, running the show, and especially being, you know, the Free State Project that's here. We do have a lot of liberty lovers in this state. Even if you're not in the Free State Project, there's a lot of people that really like their rights here. And so to see the state go the way that it did with COVID, and one of the things that I thought was interesting, obviously you and I are friends on Facebook, and I absolutely love everything that you've posted.
Thank you.
But one of the things that I thought was interesting was there were a lot of people that had a negative response to not wearing masks, to, you know, basically this idea that I'm responsible for myself. If I sit there and say I'm not at huge risk, because, like, let's face it, we now know this 99.5% survival rate for most people. You know, if I'm going to sit there and say I'm comfortable with that, I'm okay with going out, and then they sit there and say, well, but you're not protecting yourself, you're protecting me. And so you're a terrible person because you don't care about my life.
Yeah, and so to those people, I say, you are responsible for yourself, and if that's how risk-averse you are, you should stay at home. Because the rest of us are going to go on with our lives. I think one of the pennies that really dropped for me, and I did do a blog post early on, probably last March, April maybe, and I talked about, all these people who are so scared of dying. But I'm like, how are you living? And, you know, here are top 10 things you could do. You know, start meditating, cook from scratch, switch off your TV, you know, eat with your family, you know, make time, start a garden, figure out how to collect eggs and get a chicken, and, you know, things that we may need if we have an economic collapse. I hope it doesn't come to that. But so some people try to move the onus of responsibility. This is a victimhood mentality, right? Where you're like, I'm just not responsible for anything, so you've got to, and I, you know, and all of that, right? Like, I mean, I saw a guy on the way here who was sitting on the wall at a gas station smoking his cigarette with his, mask around his chin. And I was just like, no, sir, no.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, even in the libertarian community, we've had this sort of schism. I don't know. I mean, for me, it looks like the division there is genuinely between people who still consume mainstream media and people who don't. I mean, that would be sort of the number one thing where I was like, what is the division here? I also see a lot of surprising vitriol in a way that, I mean, these are people who've known me forever, right? I'm not anti-science. I'm not even anti-vax. I'm more like, we probably only need 3 of them if we need them, but we definitely don't need 70, and we don't need 70 in kids when their immune systems are developing, and we know their problems and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But, now I'm just getting attacked as an anti-vaxxer, but also I was an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa way back in the Nelson Mandela days, and I frequently get called a white supremacist now. So I'm like, okay, so people are just calling people names because they can't beat you on the idea.
Yeah.
So with the masks, I have always said, if you want to wear one, wear one. If you don't want to wear one, don't wear one. It is really that simple.
Yeah.
If you're so afraid of getting sick, then you don't get to go to Walmart. You've got to stay at home.
Yeah.
But you can't expect other people to live their life in sacrifice or in service of you. You have to assume every person owns their own body and that they're allowed to make decisions for themselves. And otherwise, we are ceding the entire public space to the government to tell us, unless you are in your own home, your castle, you are not free. And I'm not willing to cede that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should have to. So we held Pork Fest last year. I was very adamant that I would continue to do it. I invited our King Sununu to attend, as I do every year. He declined, but I did say to the media and to people who were asking, I said, look, this is a First Amendment and Second Amendment protected assembly. We've been doing it at the time for 17 years. We are going to go forth as we sally forth as we were planning to. And we were probably one of the only events worldwide that just went ahead as scheduled on the week it was planned, didn't do anything different. It is an outdoor camping event, so we were in sort of open spaces. There were maybe a handful of people who were masked. The other people weren't. Some people had social distancing bracelets, and somehow it worked. No one got sick. We all survived to tell the story. It was a Christmas miracle.
Yeah.
And, and it's just like, it was just so strange to me that people were so upset. I mean, I got back from Reopen New Hampshire, Rebuild New Hampshire rallies, and I was getting death threats. And I was like, death threats for being outside on a spring day, like, what is happening? So I hope there'll be some healing. For me, the interesting part is suddenly all the maskers are very interested in the statistics as they relate to vaccine and vaccine harm. So now they're starting to look at the stats because it counts in their favor currently. I think that's going to be a whole other story. And honestly, I was forced to get vaccinated in New York City before I moved to New Hampshire. It was in order to get my master's for the book, for the Ecstatic Pessimist. And I had actually avoided getting it for the 3 years of the program. And I think it was that January, and we were leaving in February. And they said to me that I went to get my degree, and they said, oh, you can't get it. We see here on yours, you weren't vaccinated. And I was like, yeah, but the risk's gone, so it's fine.
Oh, my gosh.
And they were like, we refuse to issue your degree unless you bring us proof of vaccination. And I regret it. I got it. After that, I got allergies. I'd never had allergies.
No.
I got rheumatoid arthritis. I'd never had that. I gained, 60, 70 pounds when I
Yeah.
came here. I was in pain, part of the reason, the drinking, right? All of that. I can't say I understand causality, correlation,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
All I know is it took me a really long time to reverse it, and it's
Yeah.
hard to draw it back. It's to that, and it's to the Cipro I took when I had a stomach bug and I
Yeah.
killed my flora. But I think people just need to relax. People need to stop being so afraid, and
Yeah.
and I never say the words like return to normal or new normal or like any
Yeah.
of that stuff. I don't like it. It's just like stop with the
Yeah.
madness.
Yeah. It's like, what is happening now? That's how I feel. It's like, what is, like, how, I just don't understand how people have gotten to the point where they are so willing to accept what's happening, and I thought it was interesting, like, you kind of talk about how the risk was gone, but they still refused to issue the letter unless you got your vaccines. I went to the Concord Co-op, and I will gladly say who it was, Concord Co-op, and they have signs up everywhere that you have to wear your mask. In the store, it's required. I did my entire shopping without a mask. Nobody said a thing to me. I get up to the register, which if you've ever been there, the register is literally right next to the door, like 6 steps, and you're out the door. And they said, we can't check you out here until you wear a mask. I was like, I have literally shopped this entire store. Like, I'm 6 feet from the door, literally, and there's plexiglass. So I'm like, all you have to do is check out these items, which I've touched, which I would have touched anyway, even if I had the mask on, and check it out, and then I walk out the door, and like literally nothing's gonna change. And nope, we can't do it.
They didn't do
They
it?
refused. So I said, I basically said, I have a medical condition and I can't wear a mask. So they said, well, can you wear a face shield? And I was like, I can tell you it's idiotic, but yeah, I can wear one. So I put the face shield on. They checked me out. I took 2 steps to the left, grabbed my bags, took the face shield off, threw it in the trash bin right there, and walked out the door. But I was like, literally, I'm not even kidding you, maybe this far, like, is how far I had to travel in order to purchase these groceries.
See, and that is, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's awful. The world should not be working like this. But it's that madness. That's the just following orders danger that I am yelling or fighting against, because that mentality is what gets you Nazism. That's what gets you death camps, right? Like, people always say, how did that happen? And it's because of compliance, and it's because someone's saying, like, you're like, this, there is no rhyme or reason, all of this is stupid. We all agree it's stupid. But then they're like, but let's just pretend it's not stupid. And I'm like, but why do you want to live in a non-reality? Like, for what reason? Like, who are we? For who are we pretending?
Yeah, exactly.
There was this, I'm not going to remember the show's name, but it's a sci-fi thing, and there are these suitcases, and these suitcases ring, right? So kind of, and it's management. And management calls people who have the suitcases and makes them, like, do evil things, right?
Yeah.
And I always think about, like, waterboarding or something, right? Where someone is doing something really bad in the now, right? Like torture, no, let's say that's a line. We don't like that. So they're torturing someone because someone told them something worse is going to happen in the future. And it's like, but if you guys, big government people, just stop doing bad things in the now, maybe we won't have bad things happen in the future. Because if we just all do the right thing and good things, meaning focus on yourself, figure out what's up there, make sure you're healthy, that your unit is under control and good. Then you look to your children, to your spouse, and then you kind of level out that way. But you don't go like Greta and solve the world's problems. Just focus on your, they say, keep your eye on your plate. Keep your eye on your plate.
Yeah, there's actually, I'm sure you're probably familiar with him, but Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And he talks about how, how can you go out and solve the world's problems if you can't even make your bed at home?
Right.
And it's the same concept. And yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's so funny to me that we've gotten to this point. And so, one of the things that was happening at the beginning of all of this was there were a lot of us who said, this is only going to get worse. Like, if we keep complying, this is going to get to a point, like, this is like how Nazi Germany started.
Mm-hmm.
They had the propaganda, they had the rat films, those are, like, super famous, and now what are we seeing? We're seeing all this propaganda about how if you don't wear the masks, you're spreading germs that you don't have, which is literally how they started, getting people against Jewish people, was they said they had diseases that they didn't have. So it's super interesting to me, like, watching those correlations and seeing how many people are totally oblivious to it. And if you say anything to them, it's like you're offending them for calling them a Nazi. And it's like, but you don't realize you are the person who would be complying in Nazi Germany, And so I guess as somebody, because you said you were out protesting with, anti-apartheid, that's pretty intense, first of all, and having come from those kinds of countries with that kind of a history, what's the correlation? And I'm sure that probably had a lot to do with why you're so liberty, minded now, is seeing that growing up and realizing we don't want that again.
Yeah, so bad government comes in lots of flavors.
Yeah.
So the flavor in South Africa was racist nationalist, right? So apartheid was literally like keeping this segregation, keeping blacks and whites apart. There's a mixed race called the Coloreds. It's not a slur. It's just the name. And they actually identified with the Afrikaans people, so the Dutch people. And, so there were all these weird things, and it was just, it was weird growing up in a country that was one that focused on race, obviously, which is something we're seeing again with this critical race theory and these things coming in to America. And that is a Marxist play. That's straight out of the Marxist book, right? We had a lot of censorship, so there were words that were censored in newspapers. This is obviously long before the internet and sort of instant news. And I think to some extent, some of this hysteria and this place we find ourselves in is because of instant news. But I also think it's going to be our savior, because I think people are they're getting overhyped and overstimulated. And I was at a rally this morning against critical race theory, because that is a theory. It is a racist theory to teach people that one race is inherently racist. Yeah, that's inherently racist. So not to get like uber circular, right? And so there was censorship, and there wasn't the internet, so it wasn't this instantaneous sort of thing that we have now. But words were censored, and then obviously messaging and all of that. So we see all of that repeat again. So I think they're overplaying their propaganda censorship hand, and that's actually going to lead a little bit to their demise, because one of the things I think that is happening that's really exciting is the decentralization of information. A podcast like yours, or like mine, or like the 100 of our friends who have them, right? These are all decentralized voices. These are all new media. It's all alternate media. It's harder to find, but I think people are finding it, and people are actually finding the things they like, right?
Yeah.
So we've always called that subcultures, right? Different subcultures. And I was always like, why do you call it a subculture or a counterculture?
Yeah.
I was like, first of all, who's defining the culture?
Yeah.
And second of all, like, why does it... That's good, right? Like, you have bikers and bakers, and you have, lovers and makers and whatever, And so we're seeing this mass decentralization, which is them losing control. Yeah. So I think we're in this battle right now between those sort of forces, and I'm an optimist, even if my book says I'm a pessimist. It's actually a character. The title is a character-driven piece. But, I think we're going to win. But to bring it full circle back to the Free State Project, that's partly the beauty of what we're doing, right? So there's the pretend world. There's like being popular on Facebook or on Twitter, but there's also looking at someone in the eye across the table and having an event like PorcFest, the Porcupine Freedom Festival. That's coming up June 21st through the 27th. It's up in Lancaster at Rogers Campground. And that same experience we had last year where 1,000 people came, this year we're expecting almost 3,000 people. We've sold 2,200 tickets again. I have no idea how many porta potties I have to order, but I've tripled it already.
Yeah.
And that is that idea of community, is actually looking people in the eye and being like, we know if the hits the fan, we actually have a plan, in the sense that at least we have thousands of people who have a sense of what is wrong and hopefully have a sense of what the solutions are. And for folks back home who are wondering what the solutions are, they're joining the Free State Project. They're moving to New Hampshire. They're bringing your family and your friends. They're making sure you're armed. They're making sure you know a little bit of prepping. Gold, silver, lead, get some like real money. I think we are looking at a potential dollar collapse of some sort. There's no way we could do the money printing that we've been doing and sustain it. $6 trillion is more money than has ever been printed before, was made in 1 year. So, like, I mean, when you see that chart, you actually like, right? It's bananas. Buy crypto, get guests. I will line up guests for you that can come talk to people about basic Bitcoin and basic alternate currencies that aren't backed by the US dollar. Then everyone get a chicken. I'm going to get a chicken this year. I am going to figure out how to do it, and I'm going to make it happen.
That's too cute. I love it. I know. And I always tell people, if 2020 taught me anything, it's to try to be as self-sustainable as possible. Because I realized very quickly that even like the whole toilet paper thing, you know, we actually had a moment where I literally had like 2 rolls left in the house, and I was running all over the state trying to find toilet paper. And I actually had friends gift them to us because we couldn't find any. And I was like, I'm going to have to go on. Did you know what family cloth is?
Yes.
They do the rags.
Yes.
I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to go old school pretty soon if I can't get a hold of anything.
No, I know. It was actually the best housewarming gift I've ever gotten was a woman I'd met at a conference came over for dinner, and she showed up. It was right at the start. It was before lockdown, even the lockdowns, I think. And she showed up with like a roll of toilet paper, and I thought, we're going to be friends forever because that's the funniest housewarming gift I've ever gotten.
And then it all made sense. And you're
right?
like, oh, that was great.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, last year for my birthday, I had a couple friends give me some packages of toilet paper, and I'm like actually very grateful.
Right? I'm like, you're treasuring it. You'll remember that gift your entire life.
It was wonderful. So many people gave us toilet paper. I didn't have to worry about it after that.
That's
great.
great.
We always had stuff. But the Free State Project, so you guys have a lot of great resources too. So I know that there's like groups that are, you know, if someone's moving here from another state, they'll set together a crew and a team to show up where they're going to be and help them unpack and unmove and, you know, stuff like that, which I mean is huge. Like that's, you know, I know, especially if you're moving across country, which we actually did because I grew up in Texas.
Oh, okay.
So I know what it's like to move across country. And, you know, it's intimidating because it's like you don't know anybody there. Like, you're going to have to find a job. Like, you know, how do you move across the country and just get up and go? And I love that the Free State Project, you guys make that so easy where you have job searches for Free State Project people. You know, I was telling you before this, but I used to work at Credit Adjustments, which is very, like, in with the Free State Project. And I didn't even know that it existed until I worked there. And it was like, I worked there for 2 years. I don't even know how I worked there that long without realizing something was happening. But all of a sudden, somebody was like, oh yeah, that person's like a Free Stater. And I was like, what is that? You know? And they explained to me, and they were like, oh yeah, most of the people are here because this is like one of those jobs that gets advertised in those groups. And so like Free Stater that needs a job here, you know, and the whole company I believe is owned by a Free Stater too.
Yep.
So it's really it's just really cool that you guys, I know there's a few different ones. There's Area 21 up in Concord or Area 23 is owned by Free Stater.
Yep.
There's a few of them that are around, and it's great that you guys kind of look out for your own in that way.
Yeah, and so we create, people who are interested, you can actually go to fsp.org, so Free State Project, but fsp.org, and then / like jobs, employment, all that will give you a lot of information. And then we have a lot of groups on Facebook, and we're trying to move to MeWe and some other platforms as well. We have a pretty active Twitter at the moment.
Oh, really?
We have, someone's running the Twitter, and they're snarky and funny. It's not me. I swear it's not me. And but it's great, you know, and it's kind of a throwdown. We're taking a lot of the criticism we get from the naysayers, you know, what's that saying? First they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win or something.
Yeah,
There's one more step.
Then they join you or something like that. Yeah.
And so we've been doing a lot of where if they criticize us, we're like, our enemies are our greatest endorsement. So it's a bit of a catch-22, right? Do you keep insulting us and we just use it for marketing, or do you leave us alone, which should probably be the preference.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of resources. We have job alert groups on Facebook also. We have a welcome wagon, as you said. So if people will let us know, and preferably, you know, not move in at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, because then it's hard to rustle up people. But if you come on a weekend, you know, we try and send crews. When I moved in 2008, bad timing, moved in February in a blizzard, and still almost 20 people showed up to help us move in. We have more movers now, so to be honest, I haven't gone to one probably in a year and a half. But I know they're still happening. Yeah. And so, you know, people who are interested, they should definitely reach out. There is a myriad of ways to get a hold of us. But really the best way is come to PorkFest.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I was so surprised though. PorkFest, the campgrounds have already sold out. And I've heard of other people that are like, oh no, they sold out already. Like, who can I bunk with, basically? Because there were so many people that really wanted to be a part of the camping experience.
Yeah, and I think we are going to see, I've always had this vision in my head. I actually organized it in 2009 and 10. That was some of my first activism with the Free State Project. And really enjoyed it, and sort of took it from the first one I went to was back in 2005, and it was up at Rogers. It moved to Gunstock for a while, and then it went back. I took it back to Rogers. But when I went to my first one, it was maybe 100 people, mostly all like New Hampshire mountain dudes with like big beards, and everyone was open carrying, and I was coming from New York City, and I was like, what is happening? And I was just, you know, but then I started talking to people about, you know, 9/11 and, you know, just things that people had questions about and wondered, and the war, and I've always been very anti-war and anti-authoritarian. But definitely anti-war. I think that, you know, we should be solving our problems peacefully. That's what civilized people do. Yeah. And, and so it's grown and grown, and I've always had this vision that it was going to be like, you know, 2 or 3, you know, sets of tents on each campsite, and the fields covered with like blankets and kids running everywhere. And so it is family friendly, but it is also freedom oriented. So, you know, you certainly are gonna, you know, smell things, you know, and you know, but it is it's really cheap. It's $50 for the whole week. That's gonna go up soon, so buy sooner rather than later. It is pork as in porcupine. That's always important to say, because we have had people show up and be like, where's this barbecue festival at? And you're like, oh, sorry. So, Porcupine Festival, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and it's now in its 18th year. We have like great speakers coming in. I mean, now have speakers actually like emailing me and being like, "Oh, I hear it's gonna be really hot. Can you fit me in?" And I'm like, maybe. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited. And, people will figure it out, so don't let the fact that the campground's filled. There are other campgrounds in the area. Santa's Village is just up the street. I think that might even still have some hotel rooms. We have an Afrikaans saying, it's a boer maak 'n plan, and that's a farmer makes a plan. Like, we'll figure it out. We can make it work.
That's cute. I've known a lot of people that have gone to Pork Fest, and actually that was, again, one of the things that I think it's that taught me what Free State Project was. Because I remember a bunch of employees at the place were going to Pork Fest, and I was like, "What's that?" And I thought the same thing. I was like, "Were they going and like grilling a pork? Like what? Like big pigs on roast? Like I was like, what is this thing?" And then somebody explained to me that it was with the Free State Project, and that's how I learned about the whole thing. Now that I'm remembering, But so that's wicked funny. But yeah, it is so funny. So the porcupine is the symbol for. It's actually libertarian, right?
Yeah, so it's actually for libertarians, and I think it's also the symbol of the LP, so of the Libertarian Party. And there's this weird distinction. It's as only geeks and nerds and people who think what the words you write down matter. So there's Big L Libertarian, which is the Libertarian Party, and then there's Small L Libertarian, which is much more big tent, and that's more like live and let live kind of people. It'd probably be more the hat we fall under. And the porcupine, I guess, has always been the symbol because porcupines are peaceful creatures. They actually just want to be left alone. But they obviously have spiky quills. And so they will defend themselves if attacked. And, if you want to do yourself a treat, go on YouTube and look for the porcupine and the lion. There's a really great little YouTube, and it's literally a lion is trying to attack the porcupine, and it's an African porcupine, and she has really, really big quills, and the lion cannot, attack her. And so the thinking is the same, right? We just want to be left alone, but we are willing to defend ourselves. So, and that's nothing beyond, we don't believe in aggressive force, so just leave us alone. You don't have to. And that's part of the thing that I feel like people don't fully understand. I think the world's America, at a minimum, is over-criminalized, right? And so it's kind of like, when we say leave us alone, we're also saying, could you stop making everything illegal? Like, we don't want to be creating all these pressure points for conflict. I mean, we literally spent a year creating, like, if you walk outside your door, it's a pressure point for conflict. Who wants to live like that? I mean, I don't, because I don't give two hoots, But you don't want to live like that. So if you want the opposite of that, come to PorcFest, where, very confusingly, we do have a pork/pig roast. And we also have a roast, like where you make fun of someone. And so it's a great week. We start the Monday, it goes through the Sunday. The big days start, Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday night, we're going to have Dave Smith from Part of the Problem. That's a big podcast, but he's also a comedian. He's done like a Netflix special. He's pretty cool. He's funny. He came a couple of years ago. That was special. Tom Woods, Bob Murphy, economist. I'm working on Naomi Wolf, who's actually come to some of our events. So that would be more lefty feminist, but she's not like crazy woke. She's she actually she brought out a book the same year that Ron Paul did, and Ron brought out one about his I forget the title, but hers was 10 Steps to Fascism, and she kind of went through them. And I brought her out to speak at one of our past conferences, and she actually had just gotten back from Guantanamo, and said in this conference room in a hotel in Manchester. Actually, it was in Nashua. She said, guys, I just want to tell you, even as a New York Jew who had family who died in the Holocaust, I never understood till I got back from Guantanamo why you guys want to have guns. And she was like, when I got there, and she said, you can smell evil. And I know it's true because I've worked in jails. You can smell evil. And she's like, I smelled evil, and I got out of there, and I was like, everyone should have a gun, and everyone should have the right to defend themselves. So that's what our quills are. It's our right to defend ourselves. We never want to use it, but we will.
Yeah. I think that's, especially in today's day and age where everything is going into a very dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
That's incredibly important to point out.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like we can, with PorkFest, by way of example, I feel like we're at the stage where we actually parlay with law enforcement.
Yeah.
I talk to the police chief.
Mm-hmm.
The deal is sort of like, you leave us alone and we'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
They tried one year, they put in a roadblock. That didn't go well. The ACLU sued. So at some stage, you just kind of go, the cost of doing business with these crazy people with their porcupines on the back of the car, it's not worth it. Just let them live their lives. And frankly, if that's the best I can do for my life in New Hampshire for the rest of my life, I'm okay with that. If I can just, be a responsible person who takes care of me and mine, who isn't a burden on other people, and, law enforcement leaves me alone, I'm okay with that. I can live with that.
Yeah.
I don't have to defund the police, but we did defund one little town's entire police station. They only had one cop, and we got it shut down.
Did you really?
Yeah, in Croydon, New Hampshire. That so it's a little town between Keene and Dartmouth, that area, Upper Valley, and it's about 800 people on the books. The school board is 2 are Free Staters. The city town clerk, the whole town is basically Free Stater based now at this stage. And last year they just said, we really don't have a need for a full-time police officer anymore. We're just going to say we aren't going to fund this position anymore, and if we have a need for law enforcement, the state troopers can come. And I don't think they've had a need for it. Because again, if you're self-policing yourself and exercising personal responsibility, then you don't really need that. Crime is low. I think people have this incredibly misplaced sense of what the world is. The world is actually incredibly safe.
Yeah.
Free markets have made us incredibly wealthy. All this drama is actually because things are going too well in the world.
Everyone's bored. So I do have to hop into some of these ads, which I was supposed to scatter throughout, but we were in such a great conversation I forgot. So Elated Canine Training and Pet Services LLC is here for your family pet's needs. We work with all ages and breeds. We run day training in our home while you're at work, private lessons at your home, group lessons, and a few other tailor-made services. Please contact Jocelyn at 603-479-7253 or on our website at elatedcanine.com for more information. We can't wait to help both you and your pup find the happy, healthy relationship you're searching for. I have 2 more. So there's also clinical hypnotherapist Kaja Weglar. She offers personalized hypnotherapy programs designed specifically for you with your unique goals in mind. Release low vibration emotions from the past, overcome childhood traumas, and create a life that you love. Become a better mom, wife, and individual, and find your inner bliss through true self-love. Leave the past behind, overcome negative self-talk and unwanted habits, and become empowered. You can reach her at facebook.com/Kaja Weglar's Hypnotherapy, and that's spelled KASIAWEGLARZ Hypnotherapy, or you can call her at 603-254-6716. And the last one for today is Homefront Firearms Training. For some of the best training that you'll get in the Northeast, Homefront Firearms Training is offering 10% off a private lesson with code HOME10 when you register. Go to www.homefrontft.com. And all of these, by the way, are liberty-friendly companies.
I
So.
can hear it.
Yes.
I was like, oh, I would do all three of those things.
Yeah, so it's been great having you here on the show. And just real quick, did you have any last tips for any families who were looking at joining the Free State Project?
So again, come visit, come meet the community, come find people. We have several community centers across New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. There's the whole Upper Valley crew. There's a Free Coast, Seacoast area. There's, Merrimack Valley. Mm-hmm. So bring the little ones to PorcFest if you can. Come check it out. Or just come anytime. Mm-hmm. Of course, again, go to the website, fsp.org. Mm-hmm. Join groups. There are family groups on Facebook. Come find us, come ask questions, poke around the website, and come join the fun. I mean, that's the other thing that, again, when you're a builder and solution-based and all of that, it's a fun community because you're actually just meeting tons of awesome people who inspire you and make you want to be better. And that's a fun life, when we're all growing and changing and helping and building. So I hope a lot of families will be inspired. People can find me at carlagericke.com. I have my blog up there and on Facebook or on social media, and reach out. If people have questions, hit me up. I will try and answer.
And now that you've done your run for Senate and you've done your book, what's next in the books for Carla Gericke? What can people look for?
Oh, that's a great question. So I do a weekly TV show called Manch Talk, so people can find that on my YouTube channel. I think I'm probably going to start to develop more of that kind of content. I am working on another book that will be a memoir about my lawsuit, and I won a really big landmark court case about filming police officers. So it was a seminal case because, all the work we're seeing on police reform really comes from the fact that for the first time ever, we can prove the things we've been saying because there's actually video proof, right? Yeah. So that's a big deal. So I'm working on that book. I hope to have it out. I'm not going to make a commitment yet, but sooner rather than later. I'm not going to wait 10 years again. Yeah. So I'm working on that. I'm actually working on a nonfiction screenplay as well. Oh. I teach, I dabble. I'll probably run for office again. I'm just one of those people. You're very hard to switch me off. So I'm always working on a ton of stuff. Ultimately, always working on me, working on my marriage, working on my friendships, and just really trying to get the message of liberty out there. I think that we need to be reminded that life is good, that life's worth living, that it's worth striving to be better, and it makes life fun, if you're trying. So, come try with us here in the Free State Project, because liberty lives in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on this show, Carla.
Thanks for having me.